In 24 hours, Keisha Williams would be holding a check for $1 million. But right now, she was debating whether to spend her last $3 on bus fare or walk home in the freezing cold. What she didn't know was that the decision she was about to make would change everything. Downtown Chicago, 6:15 p.m. Rush hour chaos. An elderly white woman and a small boy sat abandoned on a bench, surrounded by hundreds of people who pretended not to see them. The grandmother kept whispering the same terrifying words, "I don't know where we are." The little boy was crying. Both were shivering. For 3 hours, not one person stopped. They filmed. They stared. They walked away. Then Keisha appeared. She had no idea that this confused old woman was the mother of one of America's most powerful CEOs. She didn't know that helping them would trigger a series of events that would shock an entire city. She just knew they needed help. But to understand why Keisha's decision was so incredible, you need to know what her life looked like that Tuesday morning. 5:03 a.m. Her phone's alarm cut through the darkness of her tiny South Side apartment. Keisha Williams rolled out of bed, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. At 34, she felt twice her age. In the next room, her 8-year-old daughter Zara was still sleeping. Keisha smiled despite everything. That little girl was her whole world. She tiptoed to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of milk, 3 eggs, some leftover rice. Maybe enough for Zara's breakfast, but definitely not enough for both of them. Again. Keisha had been making these impossible calculations for 8 months now, ever since Davidson and Associates laid her off from her office job. Budget cuts, they said. 23 people let go in one day. She'd been making decent money there. Not great, but enough. Enough to keep Zara in a good school. Enough to buy groceries without counting every penny. Enough to feel like they were moving forward instead of just surviving. Now? Now she was working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. Hospital cafeteria from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Retail store from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 16 hours a day on her feet, serving food and folding clothes, smiling when she felt like crying. And it still wasn't enough. The eviction notice was still taped to her front door from last week. Bright yellow paper that might as well have been screaming at every neighbor who walked by. 30 days to pay $800 in back rent or find somewhere else to live. $800. It might as well have been $8,000. Keisha made Zara's lunch with what they had. A peanut butter sandwich, some crackers, and an apple that was starting to get soft. She packed it carefully in a brown paper bag, trying to make it look like the lunch boxes other kids brought to school. "Morning, baby," she whispered as Zara woke up. "Hi, Mama." Zara rubbed her eyes. "Are you working both jobs today?" Keisha's heart broke a little more. Her daughter shouldn't have to think about things like that. "Just for a little while longer, sweetie. Things are going to get better soon." She'd been saying that for months. Zara just nodded like she understood, but Keisha could see the worry in those big brown eyes. 8 years old and already learning that life was hard. The bus ride to work took 45 minutes. Keisha used the time to apply for better jobs on her phone. Customer service representative, administrative assistant, anything that paid more than minimum wage and had regular hours. But every application asked the same questions. Education level, high school, previous salary. They'd see the gap and know she was desperate. References from current employer. How could she explain she was working in a cafeteria? The hospital cafeteria job wasn't horrible, just soul-crushing. She served breakfast to doctors who made more in a day than she made in a month. They were polite enough, but she could see it in their eyes. She was invisible. Just the woman who handed them their coffee. During her lunch break, she'd count her tips. $3.47 today. Yesterday was $2.83. If she was lucky, she might make $20 in tips for the whole week. After the hospital, she had exactly 90 minutes to pick up Zara from school, help with homework, and get to her evening job at the clothing store. "Mama, Jessica's mom is taking her to see that new princess movie this weekend," Zara said as they walked home. "Can we go too?" Keisha did the math in her head. Movie tickets, popcorn, maybe dinner afterward, at least $40, money they didn't have. "We'll see, baby. Maybe we can have our own movie night at home instead." Zara's face fell for just a second before she forced a smile. "That sounds fun too, Mama." God, this kid was too good for the world. At the retail store, Keisha folded the same shirts over and over. Customers would unfold them, look at the price, and drop them back on the table. She'd smile and refold them, even when she wanted to scream. Her manager, Derek, was 22 and treated her like she was stupid. "Keisha, we need more energy. Smile bigger. These customers can sense when you're not happy to be here." Happy to be here? She was exhausted, broke, and worried sick about her daughter, but she needed this job. "Sure thing, Derek." The store closed at 10 p.m. By the time Keisha got home, Zara was asleep. Mrs. Lane from next door had watched her for free, bless her heart. But Keisha hated asking. The woman had her own problems. She sat at her tiny kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills. Rent, $800 past due. Electric company threatening shutoff, $156. Zara's inhaler prescription, $73. Groceries for the week, at least $50. Total needed, over $1,000. Money coming in from both jobs. Maybe $650 if she was lucky with tips. The math didn't work. It never worked. Keisha opened the worn leather purse that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside was a faded photo of the woman who raised her after her parents died. Grandma Rose, who always said, "Baby, we help people in trouble. That's what decent folks do." Easy to say when you're not the one in trouble. But even now, even broken and scared, Keisha still believed it. She still stopped to help elderly neighbors with their groceries, still donated $1 when the church took up collections for families in need. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "Kindness doesn't cost nothing, baby. And sometimes it's all we have to give." Tomorrow will be another day of impossible choices. Another day of smiling when she felt like breaking down. What Keisha didn't know was that tomorrow would be the day those impossible choices finally paid off. Tuesday, December 15th, 6:15 p.m. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees, and tiny snowflakes were starting to fall on downtown Chicago's financial district. Keisha pulled her thin jacket tighter as she hurried toward the bus stop. Another brutal day was finally over. 10 hours at the hospital cafeteria, then 4 hours folding clothes at the retail store. Her feet were killing her, and she had exactly $4.73 in her pocket. Enough for the bus ride home, with maybe $1 left over. She just wanted to get to Zara. But as she rounded the corner onto LaSalle Street, something made her stop. Two figures sat on a bench near the bus stop. An elderly white woman and a small boy, both looking completely out of place in the business district. The woman appeared to be in her 70s, wearing an expensive-looking wool coat that had seen better days. Her silver hair was disheveled, and she kept looking around with wide, confused eyes. "I don't know where we are," she kept saying to the little boy beside her. "Timothy, honey, I don't know where we are." The boy looked about 6 years old, clutching a small toy dinosaur against his chest. His cheeks were red from the cold, and Keisha could see he was trying not to cry. "Grandma Great," he whispered. "When is Daddy coming to get us?" The old woman just stared at the buildings around them like she'd never seen them before. I don't remember, sweetheart. I don't remember." Keisha glanced at her watch. 6:18 p.m. Her bus would arrive in 7 minutes. If she missed it, The next one wouldn't come for another 45 minutes. That meant paying for an expensive ride share, money she absolutely couldn't afford. But something about this scene felt wrong. Very wrong. The business district was emptying out fast. In another hour, this area would be completely deserted, and these two looked like they had nowhere to go. Keisha watched as streams of people walked past the bench, hundreds of commuters heading home to their families. Some glanced at the elderly woman and child, but most kept their eyes straight ahead. A man in an expensive suit actually stepped around them, clearly irritated that they were in his path. A woman with a briefcase pulled out her phone and took a picture, then kept walking. Two security guards from a nearby building approached the bench. "Hey, you can't just sit here all night," one of them said. "This is private property." The elderly woman looked up at them with frightened eyes. "Please, I'm trying to find my way home. We got separated from my son somehow." "Well, you can't wait here," the guard replied. "There's a McDonald's down the street. Wait there." They walked away, leaving the woman looking even more confused and scared. Timothy started crying softly. "Grandma, great, I'm cold and I'm hungry." The woman reached into her purse with shaking hands. Keisha noticed the purse itself looked expensive, real leather with what looked like designer hardware. Strange for someone who appeared to be homeless. "I have some money somewhere," the woman murmured, dumping contents onto her lap. Business cards scattered in the wind, a few $20 bills, keys on a silver keychain. I can't remember." That's when Keisha realized what was happening. This wasn't a homeless woman. This was someone's grandmother, someone's great-grandmother, who was lost and confused. Maybe dementia, maybe Alzheimer's. Either way, she was in trouble. The snow was falling harder now. The temperature was dropping. Timothy's lips were starting to look blue around the edges. And still, people kept walking past. A group of college kids actually laughed as they passed. "Look at the crazy old lady," one of them said. Keisha felt her grandmother's voice in her head. "Baby, we help people in trouble." But helping meant missing her bus. Missing her bus meant spending money she didn't have. Money that could buy Zara's breakfast tomorrow morning, 6:22 p.m. 3 minutes until the bus arrived. She looked at the two figures on the bench, then at the bus stop sign, then back at them. The elderly woman had stopped talking altogether now. She just sat there, holding Timothy's hand, staring into space with empty eyes. Timothy looked up and made eye contact with Keisha. His little face was streaked with tears. "Please," he whispered, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "We're lost." That did it. Keisha walked over to the bench and knelt down so she was at eye level with the little boy. "Hi there," she said gently. "My name is Keisha. What's your name?" "Timothy," he whispered. "And this is your great-grandmother?" He nodded. "Her name is Eleanor. Grandma, great. This nice lady wants to help us." Eleanor looked at Keisha with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Do you know where we are, dear? I seem to have gotten turned around." Behind them, Keisha heard the hiss of bus brakes. Her bus had arrived. She didn't even turn around to look. "Don't worry," she told Eleanor and Timothy. "We're going to figure this out together." The bus pulled away without her. What Keisha didn't know was that 6 blocks away, a frantic search was already underway. Police cars, private investigators, a reward that had just been increased to $50,000, and the man coordinating that search? He was about to become very, very grateful. The bus pulled away without her. What Keisha didn't know was that 6 blocks away, a frantic search was already underway. Police cars, private investigators, a reward that had just been increased to $50,000. But right now, all she could see was a scared little boy and his confused great-grandmother. "Okay," Keisha said, settling onto the bench. "Let's start simple. Eleanor, do you remember your last name?" "Whitman. Eleanor Whitman." "Good. And Timothy, What's your daddy's name? Richard Whitman. He works in a really tall building. Keisha pulled out her phone. Battery at 23%. Can you tell me about your house? Timothy's face lit up. It's big and white with a fountain in the front yard, and there's a gate. A big white house with a fountain. That sounded expensive, but if they had money, why were they sitting here alone? Keisha looked closer at Eleanor's appearance. The wool coat was high quality, leather shoes, designer purse. This wasn't a homeless grandmother. This was a wealthy woman who was lost. Eleanor, do you remember how you got here? Eleanor pressed her fingers to her temples. We were visiting somewhere. The new building. The children's hospital, Timothy exclaimed. We went to see the new children's hospital. Daddy said they're building it for sick kids. Do you remember leaving the hospital? Eleanor's face crumpled. I got confused. The streets all looked the same. I kept turning, trying to find the car. She started crying. I'm so sorry, Timothy. I lost us. Timothy patted her hand. It's okay, Grandma Great. The nice lady is helping us. Keisha recognized the signs from her own grandmother's dementia. The confusion, the fear, familiar places becoming foreign. Nobody's in trouble, she said firmly. We're just going to call your daddy. The snow was falling harder. Keisha took off her jacket and helped Timothy into it. But you'll be cold, he protested. I'll be fine. I'm bigger than you. She guided them to a covered building entrance and opened her Maps app. New Children's Hospital, Chicago construction. Lurie Children's Hospital expansion. Groundbreaking ceremony held today. Eleanor, were you at a groundbreaking ceremony with shovels and hard hats? Eleanor's eyes brightened. Yes, there were photographers. Richard gave a speech. Richard gave a speech. He wasn't just visiting. He was involved. Keisha called the hospital. Hi, I'm with Eleanor Whitman and Timothy from your groundbreaking ceremony today. They're lost, and I'm trying to reach Richard Whitman. Hold on, the receptionist said, then transferred her. Hospital security, you found Eleanor Whitman and Timothy? Yes, they're safe, but what's your location? We have people searching everywhere. Keisha gave the address. They're just cold and scared. Stay there. Someone will be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was fast. Really fast. While waiting, Keisha bought hot chocolate with her last few dollars. Timothy's face lit up. You're really nice, he said. Are you a mommy too? I have a daughter about your age. Her name's Zara. Maybe we can be friends. Eleanor patted Keisha's hand. You're an angel, dear. A real angel. Anyone would do the same thing. But she knew it wasn't true. Hundreds had walked past today. In the distance, flashing lights approached. A black town car pulled up, followed by a white SUV. A man in an expensive overcoat jumped out and ran toward them. 50s, graying hair, the confident bearing of money and power. Mom! Timothy! He shouted. Daddy! Timothy ran to him. The man scooped him up. Oh God, buddy, we were so scared. Are you okay? I'm fine. The nice lady helped us. She bought me hot chocolate. Richard looked at Keisha with tears in his eyes. Grandma Great is okay too. She just got confused, but Keisha took care of us. Richard set Timothy down and approached Eleanor. Mom, how are you feeling? I'm all right now. I got turned around after the hospital, but this lovely woman helped us. Richard turned to Keisha, struggling with his emotions. I don't know how to thank you. We've been searching for hours. Police, private investigators. I thought... They're both fine, Keisha said quickly. Just cold and scared. Eleanor had some confusion about directions, but they were never really in danger. But that wasn't true. 2 more hours in this weather could have been deadly. Richard pulled out a thick wallet. Please, let me give you something. You stayed with them, bought food, called for help. Keisha held up her hand. I can't take your money. But you missed your bus. You spent your own money. I did what anyone should do. I'm just glad they're safe. Richard stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Most people would have taken the money. Most people would have asked for more. But Keisha just smiled, hugged Timothy goodbye, and started walking toward the next bus stop. She had no idea that Richard was already reaching for his phone, calling someone who could find out everything about the woman who had just saved his family, and refused to take a penny for it. She had no idea that Richard was already reaching for his phone, calling someone who could find out everything about the woman who had just saved his family, and refused to take a penny for it. Richard stood there for a moment watching Keisha disappear into the snowy evening. In his world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something: money, connections, favors. But this woman had just walked away. "Sir?" His driver approached. "Should we offer her a ride? It's getting cold." Richard looked down the street. Keisha was already at the next bus stop, checking the schedule on her phone. "No," he said quietly. "Something tells me she wouldn't accept that either." He helped Eleanor and Timothy into the warm car. As they drove away, Timothy pressed his face to the window. "Bye, Keisha," he called, waving until she was out of sight. "Richard," Eleanor said from the back seat, "that young woman was special. Really special." "I know, Mom. We have to do something for her." Richard was already thinking the same thing. But first, he needed to understand who she was. 20 minutes later, they were back at Richard's Lincoln Park mansion. The house Timothy had described perfectly. White stone, circular driveway, fountain in front. While Eleanor rested and Timothy played with his toys, Richard sat in his home office and made a phone call. "Davidson Investigations. This is Mike. Mike, it's Richard Whitman. I need you to find someone for me." "Sure thing, Mr. Whitman. What do you have?" "Her first name is Keisha. African-American woman, maybe early 30s. She was downtown around LaSalle and Madison about an hour ago. She helped my mother and Timothy." "That's not much to go on." "She took the bus, the 151 line, I think. And Mike, I need this fast, like tonight fast." "I'll see what I can do." Richard hung up and walked to the kitchen, where his housekeeper Maria was making hot soup for Eleanor and Timothy. "Mr. Whitman," Maria said, "thank God they're safe. When you called this afternoon, I was so worried." "A stranger found them, Maria. A woman named Keisha. She stayed with them for hours, used her own money to buy them food, and when I tried to pay her, she refused." Maria raised her eyebrows. "She refused your money?" "Completely. She said anyone would do the same thing." "But no one did," Maria pointed out. "She did." That was the truth Richard couldn't shake. According to the security footage his team had already pulled, over 300 people had walked past that bench between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Businessmen, shoppers, tourists, students. 300 people, and only one had stopped. His phone buzzed. Text message from Mike Davidson. "Found her. Keisha Williams, 34, lives on the south side. Single mother, works 2 jobs. Want the full report?" Richard typed back, "Send everything." 30 minutes later, he was reading a file that made his chest tight. Keisha Williams. Laid off 8 months ago from an office job. Currently working at University of Chicago Hospital cafeteria, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Part-time at Fashion Express retail store, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Daughter, Zara Williams, age 8, student at Marshall Elementary. Monthly income, approximately $2,100. Monthly expenses, approximately $3,200. Eviction notice filed last week. $800 past due on rent. Medical bills from daughter's asthma treatment, $847 outstanding. Richard set the report down and walked to the window. Outside, his fountain sparkled under expensive landscape lighting. His cars sat in the heated garage. His house had 12 bedrooms, most of them empty. And today, a woman who couldn't afford to pay her rent had missed her bus and spent her last few dollars to take care of his family. He thought about the moment he'd offered her money, the way she'd held up her hand without even hesitating, like the idea of taking payment for helping people was genuinely foreign to her. In the living room, he could hear Timothy telling Eleanor about his new friend, Keisha. "She has a little girl named Zara, and she was really nice to us, and she gave me her jacket so I wouldn't be cold. She sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Daddy said we should do something nice for her." Eleanor's voice was thoughtful. "Yes, we should. Something very nice." Richard picked up his phone again. Not to call Mike Davidson this time. He called his office. "Jennifer, it's Richard. I know it's late, but I need you to set up a meeting with the board. Tomorrow morning, first thing." "Of course, Mr. Whitman. What's the meeting about?" Richard looked at the report again, at the numbers that didn't add up, at the story of a woman who worked 16-hour days and still couldn't make ends meet. A woman who could have walked past his family like everyone else did, but didn't. "I think," Richard said slowly, "I may have found exactly what we've been looking for." But what Richard was looking for would shock everyone who knew him. The next morning, Keisha was back at the hospital cafeteria by 6 a.m., serving breakfast like nothing had happened. Her feet still hurt from standing in the cold. Her phone battery had died on the expensive Uber ride home, money she couldn't afford but had no choice but to spend. She hadn't told Zara about the night before. What was the point? They were still behind on rent. The electricity bill was still due. Her daughter still needed new shoes. Helping Eleanor and Timothy had felt good in the moment. But it hadn't changed anything about their reality. What she didn't know was that across town, Richard was sitting in his office at 7 a.m., making calls that would change everything. "Patricia," he said to his wife over speakerphone, "cancel your meetings today. I need you at the board meeting." "What's this about, Richard? You sounded strange last night." "I'll explain everything when you get here. Just trust me." His next call was to his assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the week, and get me a meeting with the mayor's office." "The mayor? Richard, what's going on?" "Something important. The most important thing I've done in years." By 9 a.m., the Whitman Industries boardroom was full. 12 of Chicago's most powerful business leaders, all wondering why they'd been called in for an emergency meeting. Richard's brother David was there, his business partner Harrison, the head of their construction division, all the major stakeholders in the company's $500 million development projects. "Before we start," Richard said, "I want you all to watch something." He pulled up security footage on the large screen, black and white video from the previous evening, showing the bench where Eleanor and Timothy had waited. "This is my mother and my nephew yesterday evening. They got lost after our hospital groundbreaking and ended up sitting here for 3 hours." The room watched silently as hundreds of people walked past the bench. Some looked, some points, some took pictures. Nobody stopped. 312 people, Richard continued. "I had our security team count them. 312 people walked past my confused mother and my 6-year-old nephew. Then the footage showed a woman approaching the bench, kneeling down, talking to Timothy. One person stopped, one person out of 312. Richard paused the video on Keisha's face. "Her name is Keisha Williams, single mother, works 2 jobs, can barely pay her bills, and when I offered her money to help my family, she refused." The boardroom was completely silent. David leaned forward. "Richard, this is touching, but why are we here?" Richard smiled. "Because for 6 months, we've been trying to fill a position that nobody wanted. Community Outreach Director for our affordable housing project. Salary, $150,000. The job requires someone who understands real community needs." He looked around the room. "I think I found her." But what Richard was about to propose would shock even his own family. Harrison, Richard's longtime business partner, shook his head. "Richard, I understand you're grateful, but we can't just hire someone off the street for a $150,000 position. She works in a cafeteria. Exactly, Richard said. She works in a cafeteria. She knows what it's like to struggle. She understands the community we're trying to serve. David, Richard's brother, looked skeptical. Come on, Richard. Community outreach requires education, experience, connections. You can't just... Can't just what? Richard interrupted. Give someone a chance? The same chance this company gave me 30 years ago? The room fell silent. Everyone knew the story. Richard had built Whitman Industries from almost nothing after their father died, leaving behind massive debts. But this felt different. This felt personal. Richard walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago. Let me tell you what I learned about Keisha Williams last night. He turned back to face the room. She was laid off 8 months ago from a decent office job. Not her fault. Company downsizing. Since then, she's been working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to support her daughter. Richard clicked to another slide. Financial records. She makes about $2,100 a month. Her expenses are $3,200. She's behind on rent, utilities, medical bills for her daughter's asthma. By every measure, she should be focused on her own survival. Another click. The security footage again. But yesterday, she spent her last few dollars and missed her bus to help complete strangers. People who, let's be honest, probably look nothing like her and come from a completely different world. Patricia, Richard's wife, spoke up from the back of the room. Richard, we all think it's wonderful that she helped Eleanor and Timothy, but running community outreach for a $50 million project requires... Requires what, Patricia? An MBA? A networking Rolodex? A summer home in the Hamptons? Richard's voice was getting louder. For 6 months, we've interviewed candidates with perfect resumes, Harvard degrees, connections to every charity in Chicago. And you know what? Every single one of them failed. Failed how? David asked. They couldn't connect with the actual communities. They talked about stakeholder engagement and demographic targeting and impact metrics. But when they went to community meetings, nobody trusted them because they were outsiders trying to help people they'd never understand. Richard clicked to a new slide. Photos from previous community meetings. Room after room of empty chairs. Our affordable housing project is supposed to serve working families, single mothers, people working multiple jobs just to survive. People exactly like Keisha Williams. He paused, letting that sink in. And here's the thing that really gets me, Richard continued. When I offered Keisha money yesterday, she didn't just politely decline. She looked at me like the idea of taking payment for helping people was genuinely confusing to her. Jennifer, his assistant, raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Whitman, I pulled her employment records from her previous job. She actually has relevant experience. Customer relations, project coordination, community volunteer work. Thank you, Jennifer. But honestly, her resume isn't why I want to hire her. Richard walked back to the security footage, frozen on Keisha's face as she knelt beside Timothy. I want to hire her because in 3 hours yesterday, she showed more genuine care for our family than some people have shown in 30 years of business relationships. The room was quiet now. People were actually listening. But here's the real reason, Richard said, his voice getting softer. My mother has Alzheimer's disease. Early stages, but it's getting worse. Yesterday she got confused and lost downtown. She could have died. Several people in the room looked surprised. Richard had kept Eleanor's condition private. 312 people saw a confused elderly woman and a crying child, and they all decided it wasn't their problem, except for one person. A person who had every reason to keep walking, to worry about her own problems. Richard looked around the room at faces he'd known for decades. Millionaires, all of them. People who donated to charity galas and served on hospital boards. How many of us would have stopped? He asked quietly. Nobody answered. That's what I thought. So when I tell you that Keisha Williams has something we can't buy, can't teach, and can't fake, I mean it. She has genuine compassion, and that's exactly what our community projects have been missing. Harrison leaned forward. Richard, even if we agree she has the right heart, this is a huge responsibility. Managing budgets, coordinating with city officials, representing the company, all of which she can learn. We'll provide training, support, and mentorship. But compassion, either you have it or you don't. And she has it. Richard clicked to a final slide, the architectural plans for their new community center and affordable housing project. This project is supposed to help people like Keisha, single mothers working multiple jobs, families struggling to make ends meet. Who better to guide that project than someone who actually understands their lives? David shook his head. Richard, I admire what you're trying to do, but this is business. We can't just... Business? Richard's voice rose again. Our affordable housing project has been stalled for 2 years because we can't get community buy-in. Our last 3 community meetings had a total of 12 attendees. 12! He clicked back to the empty meeting rooms. We've spent hundreds of thousands on consultants and community relations firms, and we're further from breaking ground than we were a year ago. Maybe it's time to try something different. Patricia stood up. What exactly are you proposing, Richard? Richard smiled for the first time all morning. I'm proposing we offer Keisha Williams the position of Community Outreach Director. Full salary, benefits, housing allowance. And I'm proposing we do it today. The room erupted. Today? Richard, that's insane. You can't make hiring decisions based on one act of kindness. What if she says no? Richard held up his hand for silence. There's one more thing, he said. Something I haven't told you yet. He looked around the room at 12 very worried faces. I'm not just offering her the job. I'm making her my partner on this project. She'll have full authority over community relations and a $2 million annual budget to distribute to local programs. The silence was deafening. And that's not all, Richard continued. We're establishing the Keisha Williams Community Heroes Fund, $1 million to help people who help others. David stood up abruptly. Richard, have you lost your mind? David was pacing now, his face red. You want to give a cafeteria worker a $1 million budget based on one good deed? Not one good deed, Richard said calmly. One character revelation. This is insane! Harrison stood up too. Richard, I've known you for 20 years. You don't make emotional decisions. This isn't like you. Maybe that's the problem, Richard replied. Maybe I've been making the wrong kind of decisions. While the boardroom erupted in arguments, Richard was already reaching for his phone. He'd made up his mind. Jennifer, I need you to contact Keisha Williams immediately. Set up a meeting for this afternoon. Sir, shouldn't we wait for the board to... The board doesn't hire community outreach directors, I do. Patricia approached her husband. Richard, slow down. Even if this woman is wonderful, you can't just offer her a job without interviewing her properly. Interview her? Richard laughed. Patricia, I watched her interview for 3 hours yesterday. She showed me everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, across town, Keisha was wiping down tables in the hospital cafeteria. It was 11:30 a.m., the slow period between breakfast and lunch. Her phone was in her locker, turned off to save battery. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Dr. Martinez, one of the regular customers, approached her station. Keisha, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important. Keisha looked up to see a woman in an expensive suit standing by the cafeteria entrance. Professional, well-dressed, completely out of place. Ms. Williams, I'm Jennifer Walsh. I work for Richard Whitman. We met last night? Keisha's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Was Richard angry that she'd refused his money? Is everything okay? Are Eleanor and Timothy... They're fine, Jennifer said quickly. Mr. Whitman would like to meet with you today. Would 2 p.m. work? Keisha glanced at her supervisor, who was watching curiously. I get off work at 2, but I have to pick up my daughter and get to my evening job by 6. This won't take long, Jennifer assured her. And Ms. Williams? Mr. Whitman asked me to tell you this conversation could change your life. At 2:15 p.m., Keisha stood outside the Whitman Industries building, feeling completely out of place. 47 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the sky. The lobby was all marble and mirrors. The security guard looked her up and down. Can I help you? I'm here to see Richard Whitman. I'm Keisha Williams. The guard's expression changed immediately. Of course, Ms. Williams. Mr. Whitman is expecting you. The elevator ride to the 45th floor felt like it took forever. Keisha caught her reflection in the mirrored walls and wanted to disappear. Her hospital cafeteria uniform looked shabby and wrinkled. Jennifer met her at the elevator. Right this way, Ms. Williams. They walked through an office that looked like something from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Conference rooms with leather chairs that probably cost more than Keisha's rent. Richard's office was even more intimidating. The man himself sat behind a desk the size of a small car, but he stood up when she entered and smiled warmly. Keisha, thank you for coming. Please, sit. She perched nervously on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her car. First, Richard said, I want to apologize for not properly introducing myself yesterday. I'm Richard Whitman. I'm the CEO of this company. Keisha's eyes widened. CEO. She'd helped the CEO's family. I also want to thank you again for what you did for my mother and Timothy. There's no way to repay that kindness. You don't need to repay anything, Keisha said quickly. I'm just glad they're safe. Richard smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. He walked around the desk and sat in the chair next to her. Keisha, can I ask you something? What do you know about community development? The question caught her off guard. Not much, I guess. Why? Because I have a proposition for you. Something that might sound crazy at first. Richard opened a folder on his desk. My company is building a $50 million community center and affordable housing project on the South Side. It's designed to help working families, single mothers, people in situations similar to yours. Keisha nodded, not sure where this was going. The problem is, we can't connect with the community. We've hired consultants, held meetings, and brought in experts. But the people we're trying to help don't trust us. They see us as outsiders. Richard turned to face her directly. Yesterday, you proved something important. You have genuine compassion for people. You understand struggle. And you have the respect that comes from living in the community you'd be serving. I'm not sure I understand. Keisha, I want to offer you a job. Community Outreach Director for our development project. Your job would be to make sure our projects actually help the people who need it most. Keisha stared at them. A job? Here? The salary is $150,000 per year, plus full benefits and a housing allowance. Keisha felt like the room was spinning. $150,000? That was more than she'd made in the last 3 years combined. Mr. Whitman, I think there's been a mistake. I work in a cafeteria. I never finished college. I don't know anything about— You know the most important thing, Richard interrupted. You know what it's like to need help, and you know how to treat people with dignity when they're struggling. He slid another paper across the desk. There's also a signing bonus of $50,000 to help you get back on your feet immediately. Keisha's hands were shaking as she looked at the number. $50,000. Enough to pay her rent, her daughter's medical bills, everything. But there's more, Richard continued. We're establishing a community fund in your name. The Keisha Williams Community Heroes Fund. $1 million to help people who help others. You'd decide who gets the grants. $1 million? Keisha couldn't finish the sentence. Your story inspired this, Keisha. Someone who has so little but gives so much. We want to find other people like you and help them help others. Keisha was crying now. I can't. This is too much. I don't deserve... You deserve a chance, Richard said firmly. The same chance you gave my family yesterday when you could have kept walking. He handed her a tissue. Take your time. Think about it, but I hope you'll say yes. Keisha wiped her eyes and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Zara was in after-school care, probably wondering why Mommy was so late. If I said yes, she whispered, when would I start? Richard smiled. How about Monday? 6 months later, you wouldn't recognize Keisha Williams. She stood in front of a room filled with 50 community members, confidently presenting the final plans for the Southside Community Center. Gone were the hospital scrubs and tired eyes. In their place, a professional blazer, bright smile, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing she belonged exactly where she was. The child care center will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., she explained, clicking to the next slide, because I know what it's like to work 2 jobs and need somewhere safe for your kids. Heads nodded around the room. These weren't the empty community meetings from before. Every seat was filled. People were taking notes, asking questions, and volunteering to help. Maria Santos, a single mother from the neighborhood, raised her hand. Keisha, will there really be job training programs? Not just job training, Keisha smiled. Medical certification courses, small business loans, and mentorship programs, because getting a better job shouldn't depend on who you know or what neighborhood you grew up in. After the meeting, Keisha walked through the construction site where the community center was taking shape. Hard hats and safety vests had replaced her old uniform, but she still remembered exactly how it felt to count pennies and worry about tomorrow. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zara, who was now thriving at Lincoln Elementary, one of Chicago's best schools. Mom, I got an A on my science project. Can't wait to show you tonight. Keisha smiled. Zara's asthma was under control thanks to proper medical care. No more emergency room visits. No more choosing between medicine and groceries. Their new apartment in Lincoln Park was 3 times the size of their old place. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and, Zara's favorite, a window seat where she could read her books. But the biggest change wasn't in their living situation. It was in the community around them. The Keisha Williams Community Heroes Fund had already changed dozens of lives. There was Marcus Thompson, the veteran who'd been living in his car. The fund helped him get an apartment and job training. Now he worked construction on the very community center Keisha was building. There was Sarah Lane, the teenager who'd been caring for her sick grandmother while trying to stay in school. The fund paid for nursing care so Sarah could focus on her studies. She was now pre-med at Northwestern, with plans to open a clinic in her neighborhood. There was the Rivera family, whose small restaurant was failing during the pandemic. A $15,000 microloan from the fund kept them in business. Now Rivera's Cocina was thriving, and they employed 8 people from the neighborhood. The local news had picked up on the story. Channel 7 did a feature called The Cafeteria Worker Who Became Chicago's Community Champion. But the recognition Keisha valued most came from the people she served every day. Like Mrs. Washington, the elderly woman who stopped her on the street last Tuesday. "Child, you saved my grandson's life," she said, tears in her eyes. That job training program got him off the streets and into steady work. His whole future is different now. Or James Miller, who approached her after a community meeting. Ms. Williams, 6 months ago, I was ready to give up. Couldn't find work, about to lose my apartment. Then I heard about your emergency assistance fund. You not only helped with rent, you helped me believe in myself again. The numbers told an incredible story. 247 families directly helped through the community fund. 89% of job training program graduates found employment within 30 days. $3.2 million in additional business investment attracted to the neighborhood. Crime in the target area dropped 34% since programs began. High school graduation rate up 18%. But Keisha's favorite statistic was this one: 1,200 volunteer hours logged by community members helping each other. The spirit of kindness was spreading. Richard watched it all unfold from his office window, looking down at the construction site where hundreds of people were building something bigger than themselves. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door. "Mr. Whitman, the mayor's office called. They want to discuss expanding the Keisha Williams model to 5 more neighborhoods." Richard smiled. "Set up the meeting, and make sure Keisha leads the presentation." Eleanor, now in a specialized memory care program funded by the community center, had good days and difficult days. But on her good days, she loved to tell anyone who would listen about the angel who saved Timothy and changed our whole family. Timothy, now 7, volunteered at the community center's kids program every Saturday. When people asked him why, he always gave the same answer: "Because Aunt Keisha taught me that helping people is what good people do." The ripple effects kept spreading. Other developers across Chicago started hiring community liaisons from the neighborhoods they served. The city implemented new requirements for community input on all major projects. Urban planning programs at local universities added courses on authentic community engagement. But perhaps the most meaningful change happened every day at 3:30 p.m., when kids got out of school and headed to the new community center. Safe, supervised, with hot meals and homework help waiting. The same kids who might have been on the streets were now learning music, playing sports, and dreaming about college. All because one woman decided to stop and help when everyone else kept walking. But the story wasn't over yet. The most important moment was still to come. 1 year later. December 15th. The exact anniversary. It was snowing again, just like that night. But this time, the corner of LaSalle and Madison buzzed with celebration. The grand opening of the Keisha Williams Community Center. Hundreds gathered under white tents, city officials, business leaders, and families from the neighborhood who would call this place home. Richard stood at the podium. "1 year ago, my mother and nephew got lost on this very corner. They sat on that bench for 3 hours while hundreds walked past." He pointed to the original bench, now part of a memorial garden. One person stopped. One person out of hundreds. And that decision changed all our lives. The crowd looked at Keisha, sitting beside Eleanor and Timothy. Eleanor was having a good day, alert and smiling. Timothy, now 8, whispered excitedly about the programs they'd visit. "Today, we're not just opening a community center," Richard continued. "We're celebrating what happens when ordinary people choose extraordinary kindness." He handed the microphone to Keisha. She walked to the podium, looking at faces that had become family. "A year ago, I was counting pennies and wondering how I'd pay rent," she began. "I almost didn't stop that night. I was tired, broke, worried about my own problems." Her voice grew stronger. "But my grandmother always said, 'Baby, we help people in trouble. That's what decent folks do.'" She looked at Eleanor, who was nodding and smiling. "I learned that helping others doesn't cost you anything. It gives you everything." Timothy ran to the microphone. "Can I say something?" Keisha lifted him up. "Hi, everyone. Aunt Keisha is the best helper in the world, and now we're all helpers too." The crowd laughed and applauded. After the ribbon cutting, families poured into the building. Kids ran to the playground. Parents signed up for job training. Seniors headed to the wellness center. In the memorial garden, a plaque read, "On this spot, December 15th, one act of kindness changed thousands of lives. Remember, you never know when your moment to help will come." As celebration continued inside, Keisha stood alone at the bench. Snow falling softly, city lights twinkling. Her phone rang. "Keisha Williams Community Heroes Fund, this is Keisha." "Ms. Williams, I saw your story on the news. There's a homeless veteran in my neighborhood who needs help." Keisha smiled, walking toward her car. I'll be right there. Tell me what's happening. Some things never change. There's always someone who needs help, and now there are always people ready to give it. Some things never change. There's always someone who needs help, and now there are always people ready to give it. Keisha's story proves that the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest changes. A woman with almost nothing gave 20 minutes of her time to help strangers. That decision transformed not just her life, but thousands of others. Every day you walk past people who need help. The confused elderly person at the grocery store, the single parent struggling with groceries and kids. The lost tourist looked scared and overwhelmed. Your moment is coming. Will you be ready? Here's my challenge for you. This week, stop for someone who needs help. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Just notice. Just care. Just act. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to Blacktail's Stories for more incredible true stories of ordinary people changing the world. And tell me in the comments, when was the last time you helped a stranger? Or when did a stranger help you? Let's celebrate the helpers.